Hello, good afternoon. So I guess to start by maybe spicing things up a little bit or just discussing, I've always been fascinated actually by how do we differentiate ourselves amongst protocols and layer ones. And so I did a little exercise before, which is to take some taglines from different websites of our panelists here, and I'd like you guys to raise your hand if you think it's actually written on your website. So, a fast, high-throughput, open-source smart contract platform for digital assets and dApps. Who's that? Yes, it's you. Good job. We got that one right.
I passed the test, all right. Now I can go, yeah.
Building a new future, a highly performant open-source blockchain platform built to support and operate safe, compliant, and predictable digital infrastructures. Who's that? Come on, guys, it's on your websites. Yves, it's you.
I raised my hand.
Good. We aim to create a blockchain singularity in which every system and service is rebuilt and reimagined using smart contracts and runs entirely from infinite public blockchain without need of traditional IT. Yes, it's Dominic, DFINITY. And last but not least, but now you know, highly scalable, secure, and decentralized blockchain network created to enable radically new applications for users, businesses, society, and the new Metaverse frontier. Okay,
yeah,
so let's
us.
get real. How do we get to mass adoption if that's how we described ourselves? I'd love to hear from your perspective, views on the future of protocols and how we can actually get to the mass adoption that we think we all believe in. Do you want to start with you, Yves?
Sure. First of all, I think it's a really good question because it's forward-facing, right? And it's really fitting with the theme. And before this, we were talking about kind of what, obviously, the events that are going on right now, how that comes into play. And one thing that stood out that a few of us mentioned is we're actually living in the future of the blockchain right now. We're seeing it as it's happening, and we're seeing events right now that are clearly impacting what will come tomorrow and what will come the next year and such. But one thing that we kind of all came down to as well is that tech side of things. And you had mentioned that a few years back, or some of us, we put the tech forward. It's the fastest, it's the highest throughput and such, and that's something that combines everybody. Outside of that, where's the future of blockchain? Outside of that, kind of where is the blockchain space going? And Michael and I were talking about, for example, one thing that he brought up was insurance layer, just specific actual implementations or use cases that we believe at some point will become more inherent and start leveraging the blockchain stacks. And that was another thing, is this idea of a few years back, a lot of blockchain developers were trying to implement solutions that currently exist in the space. But more and more, the future that I see are people out there, Web 2 developers. It's traditional end industry recognizing that blockchain can provide benefits and that tech stack and the inherent properties of blockchain. So they're now the ones leading the charge in terms of adopting the different protocols.
Yeah.
And so that's where I see the future. I see more of Web 2 starting to see the advantages of Web 3 and starting integrating it in their stacks.
What's your view, Michael, on that?
Yeah, I think when it comes down to getting mass adoption, it's really about two things. It's really about the underlying technology and the use cases, right? So when it comes down to the technology, we're at the stage where I think blockchain technology across the different blockchains that are out there can handle probably like a few million users on a daily basis. But the number of people who play a single game out there is more than a few million, right? So right now, the technology can't even handle like a few million users playing a game that are repeatedly sending transactions to the blockchain for confirming NFTs, as an example. So I think on the one hand, we need to have a lot more scalable technology out there, and that's just like a matter of like hard work, right? There's different ideas out there in terms of improving consensus, improving like what's known as middleware or the execution of smart contracts, or like execution using say zero knowledge proofs now is like a big discussion point. So one is technology, and I think technology will get more scalable and more efficient over time, and that's just like naturally how technology works. And number two is really like use cases, as my friend mentioned, like different use cases out there that are not just like not every use case needs to be on the blockchain, but there are some use cases that are really good for blockchain. Things like, for example, like gaming, being able to create NFTs to enhance the gaming experience. Things like P2P insurance, which you can only really do when it's a publicly open source blockchain, or even supply chain management, and of course there's DeFi as well. So I think when there's more use cases, that use the blockchain technology, and the technology gets more scalable, that's how we get mass adoption. And it's also just a matter of time, people learning about it. Adoption always takes a bit of time.
Yeah, but it's interesting. So far, it's a lot about we could swap any of the protocols that are under, and it would be still the same thing. So I guess, Lucian, maybe going back to this mass adoption, but also what's the difference between key protocols, right? So how do you see that?
Well, it's a very good question because actually Elrond, we just announced last week, is transforming and is becoming MultiversX. So basically, we are no longer just a layer 1 blockchain. This is still our main focus, so we are still, let's say, an infrastructure provider, but now what we want to do is also build the next infrastructure, and this is our vision that actually in the next few years and decades, Metaverse is going to be the next big thing. And of course, it's a kind of different Metaverse that there is out there, in the sense that we want this kind of Metaverse to inherit the same principles when we talk about Web3 and blockchain. So it's not a Metaverse built by one company. It's not actually the Metaverse. It's actually like worlds of worlds, a network of Metaverses where anyone can build their own thing. They are interoperable and stuff like that. And the idea here is that as blockchain, we see blockchain as like the fabric of reality. For us, if you are to build a meaningful Metaverse, you need blockchain. So for us, a Metaverse cannot exist without the blockchain, because you need ownership, because you need decentralization, you need different kind of business models. Well, not every, let's say, the network effect and all the benefits are captured in the center by a corporation for profit, but basically you have all those benefits. So for us, this is a very different approach. It's not a rebranding, it's more like a transformation, an evolution. And we believe by doing that actually is, I might say that the killer app of the blockchain is the Metaverse. And the killer app of the Metaverse is presence and not necessary immersion or realism. And this also comes from a very interesting insight is, as web is device agnostic, you can access it from any kind of the device. This is also our approach. The metaverse or the multiverse of these metaverses the way we want to build it is so that can be accessed without any kind of device. Although immersion, VR, IR are really, really interesting and nice things that we at some point will want to integrate, we say that this is not the precondition for a metaverse. So I guess this is a pretty big use case, and it's not something that, I don't know, like DeFi was the cool thing, I don't know, 2 years ago. NFT was last year. Now it's something. This is something that it's for a very long time, as I said, the next few years and decades. I think Metaverse and of course blockchain as the fabric of this kind of reality are very, very important.
Okay. Well, Dominic, I'm curious. So we are hearing Metaverse, killer app presence. We're hearing gamify. We're hearing supply chain. What's your perspective on actually mass adoption and how we get there?
So I think the real challenge is a technical one, and it's not one that many people are aware of in the industry today. And today, when people say they're building on a blockchain XYZ, they don't mean they're building on blockchain XYZ. They mean they're building on the cloud, right? Mm-hmm. And then they just use the blockchain to store some tokens and NFTs. And for me, that's not what Web3 is about, okay? For me, Web3 really is about user ownership, user involvement, and things like that. Web 1 was read. We just read content from web servers, as in the 1990s. 1996, 1997, there was that website, Hot or Not, right? And now users could upload their own content to the internet for other users to read. So that was Web 2. That was about write. So read, write, and Web 3's own. And, I think Web 3 has obviously come out with a bang, and, NFTs were very popular, and people were buying tokens to own art and things like that. But really, Web 3 is a much more profound thing. And really you need to be able to run something like Facebook on the blockchain under the control of a DAO. So you don't have a company and a CEO, and you can give governance tokens in the DAO that controls the social network to the users. And users can help with referring other users to make it grow more virally and help with tasks like content moderation. So that's our belief. And the DFINITY Foundation probably spent more time in R&D than any other organization in the history of crypto. We started offering in 2015. The mainnet came out last year, May 21. And the internet computer is a world computer, and people are building this kind of thing on the internet computer now. Social media services that run 100% from the blockchain. So, we got even, mass market messaging services, which are growing rapidly, where smart contracts are processing individual chat messages and even the, image and video chats people send each other. And these smart contracts process HTTP. It's the only blockchain in the world where smart contracts can serve interactive web experiences. So you can decentralize everything end to end. And it's not just limited either to social media and things like that, Metaverse, SocialFi, GameFi, whatever. There's a huge range of things that benefit from full decentralization, running 100% on the blockchain. And for example, if you go to my Twitter feed, I think a few hours ago, I tweeted a link to a decentralized exchange that's under development that provides continuous double auction functionality, i.e. the same kind of functionality as FTX provides. But it's running 100% on the blockchain. The user experience is coming from the blockchain. The order book's on the blockchain. The order matching's on the blockchain. There's no cloud involved. It's something that looks like FTX, gives you the same functionality, but it runs 100% on the blockchain. And it's in beta, and those guys are going to assign control to a DAO, right? And so it'll run under the control of the community, and the community will push the updates, to the smart contracts. So that kind of thing, look how many users, centralized exchanges have. Enormous numbers of users, right? Well, imagine you can tell a user, hey, rather than trusting somebody to look after your assets and putting it on a centralized exchange, why don't you use this completely decentralized exchange that provides the same functionality? Yeah. So I don't think it's difficult. I think it's a technology problem. I think all blockchains have got to make efforts to pursue the world computer vision and redesign themselves using advanced cryptography so that they can host social networks, right? And imagine with a social network, imagine if you wanted to grow. It's not enough just to provide the same functionality. You've got to give users governance tokens so they own some of the social network, so they refer their friends, right? And it grows virally. You need teams of people to help with things like content moderation. So you can only do that if you're running on the blockchain. You can't do it if you're running on Amazon Web Services and you're just keeping a few tokens and NFTs on the blockchain. Yeah. That doesn't work. So everyone has to move towards this world computer model, and that's how we get mass adoption, and we're already seeing it in services that are running in that way now.
Okay. You mentioned FTX, actually, so I think it's impossible to continue without actually mentioning what's happening, and so what we are trying all to unravel and make sense of as we are living history live, right? So Yves, I'm actually curious on your take. What do you think are some of the big movements that we're going to see, and what's on your mind as we go through those moments?
We're already starting to see some of them. Transparency is a big one that blockchain is able to provide, right? Yeah. So we saw CZ this morning disclosing the assets on the sheets of Binance, that type of thing. We've seen that what happened with XTX, and it's still unfolding, so a lot of it is speculation on what happened, but were similar issues that occurred essentially in 2008 that led to the creation of this industry as it exists today, were being replicated on FTX, essentially. And moving away from that, we have the tools. This is what this is built for, and in some circumstances, it's just not being used yet. either because the tech isn't there, or there's no will, or for whatever reason, it doesn't really matter. I think what we're seeing out of this is there's definitely going to be more regulation, whether we like it or not. There's definitely going to be a further, I think, a lack of trust that's going to come to those that don't, that aren't, let's say, open-facing and that aren't proactively giving out the information that technically they could provide, and there's no real reason not to provide it. And we're going to start to see a migration of users that are going to, I think, kind of like what Dominic just mentioned, go towards those that offer those solutions that are inherent to the blockchain, and that you start leveraging. He's talking about a DEX, he's talking about how his users can interact with a DAO, start seeing more use cases that are stemming from what this was originally built for. And I think we're going to start seeing that relatively rapidly with what just happened. And oftentimes in industry, things move and the industry changes, not because necessarily it was planned, but because there's an event like this. So we saw a few years back with COVID, how now suddenly all the CTOs in the world now just upgraded their industries, and it wasn't because they weren't in place beforehand, it's basically their hand was played to them, and I think we're about to see that now as well with what's happening currently.
So transparency, increased regulation, lack of trust on our entire industry, a push for more decentralization, going back to what's original. What else do you see, Michael?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say that I'm very sorry to hear about everything that's gone on. I flew out of the Bahamas on Sunday, and Monday this whole thing unfolded, and I heard a whole bunch of stories from people, not just directly at FTX, but people, but also other people in the economy as a whole of the Bahamas, because they were quite a big part of the Bahamas economy. And of course, there's a lot of stuff that's coming out there. There's a lot of news that's coming out, seemingly every hour. So, I can't really comment about what I think is going on. What I will say is that, the silver lining to everything is that it means that users are much more interested now in transparency around the proof of reserves of exchanges, right? And so I think the regulation will be at least that exchanges around the world will have to kind of prove on a regular basis through transparency of the blockchain, which is a big advantage of the blockchain, combined with audits that are regularly done, maybe every 6 months or whenever, so people constantly know that the user funds are there and that what the exchanges are telling them is correct, is accurate. That being said, I hope people don't accidentally conflate what has happened with that it's a problem with DeFi. In fact, DeFi is kind of the opposite, right? DeFi has a lot of transparency. You can see all the transactions on chain on the public network, and I think that's a great thing. So I think people are going to demand more transparency, and I think that people are going to realize that projects on the blockchain, say with DeFi or any other use case, give you that additional level of transparency because the data is there, it's public, anybody can see through it, anybody can pass it, and so you won't be able to say something is there when it's not recorded on the blockchain, and I think that's what is very important.
Okay, Lucian, what's your take?
So I definitely
transparency is definitely coming, so something else.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with what was said before. What I want to add here, it's sad that we have these centralized actors, and we users don't demand those actors to use the blockchain especially for transparency, but for example, also there are so many other things that blockchain can help, and these are actors in our space that don't use blockchain maybe at its full potential. I don't know, maybe it's KYC or other things that probably can be done so much better, and definitely what happened in the last few days, last few months and last year, it's a very, very strong use case for all the others, let's say non-custodial wallets, DeFi and stuff like that, and yeah, that would be from me, so not a lot new here.
Okay, Dominic, any other views?
I think the most important thing to note in all of this is DeFi has actually been remarkably robust in the face of all this volatility. And we're not hearing about Aave breaking and things like that. So there's a lesson there, right? All the problems that we tend to face generally derive from centralization, okay? So whether that's 3 Hours Capital being a Ponzi and losing, Celsius and Voyager's money, or FTX. I mean, look, I don't trade crypto anymore, but I've been around long enough to have lost money on Mongox, lost money on DFINITY, so clearly there's an issue with centralized crypto. This isn't anything new. History sort of repeats itself, right, in this field. So, I think the message is pretty clear. Unfortunately, we're going to need, centralized exchanges to be gateways to the fiat system, and so we should just demand that these centralized exchanges are very transparent. And also, lastly, I think blockchain, has got to be more careful about the leaders that it chooses and who it allows to become the face of crypto.
Yeah.
I think, there are a lot of people who are quite passive. While Sam was presented as the JP Morgan of crypto, right? It didn't say anything. He was insolvent and knew it while he was pretending he could put $3 to $15 billion into the Twitter acquisition. And it was a confidence scam. He wanted to keep projecting strength so he could raise more money to keep this kind of Ponzi thing going. With respect to FTX specifically, I don't know how many of you are familiar with this website, cryptoleaks.info. Anyone? Cryptoleaks.info, have you seen it? All right, good, some people. But there's some concern that this thing called ICP perp was used to crash the ICP price when the Internet Computer launched and create this narrative that there was something wrong with the project, which, by the way, has been for a long time blockchain's largest R&D project. We have the largest team of top cryptographers in the world. Many things, most things actually, that blockchain now incorporates, like BLS cryptography. The inventor works at DFINITY. WebAssembly virtual machine. Inventor works at DFINITY. Ethereum 2.0, very similar to early DFINITY design from 2015, early 2015. But somehow this narrative was created, and the suspicion is that it was done to sort of clear the way for another blockchain, which Sam and some others are invested in. I don't know if it's true or not, but CryptoLeaks was the first investigative journalism outfit to have the courage to stand up and fire a shot across the bows of this guy. But I think there's a problem here. People with integrity don't trade with customer funds. Mm-hmm. They don't. They just don't do it. I bet CZ would never do it, right? And we seem to have, as an industry, repeatedly put people into positions of power, particularly in relation to centralized finance, centralized crypto, who may not have that much integrity. So I think that's another thing. Yeah. We need to be more decentralized. We need to demand more transparency from the centralized on and off ramps that take people from fiat to crypto and back. But we also need to think long and hard about, who we're choosing as leaders and who we allow to represent us. Because don't forget, for the outside world, Sam Bankman-Fried is the face of crypto. So he's the JP Morgan of crypto, and that means all of us are harmed by this.
Yeah, maybe bouncing actually on that. I think you're raising an excellent point around values and integrity. And if we look at the world around us, I think it's an absolute turmoil. And we were talking about that before on going on the panel. It's not just, our crypto world that feels like everything is falling. It's, war on the European soil. It's like climate change. It's just like, values for democracy and what it means. And I think you're raising an excellent point, which is actually values, integrity, and what are we building for the future? And so, Yves, maybe coming back to you, how do we think, long term? Ultimately, I think each and every one of us here is to believe that we can create something that is better, that will ultimately transform the world for true values. How do we stay true to that, and how do we build that better world?
That's a really good question. it's something that I've been reflecting a lot on because I've been in this industry now for quite some time. And when I first came into this industry, it was shortly after 2008. It was very early adopter. And I was definitely of the mindset that what was being created and what I was a part of was really going to completely overturn and change the current system. And as I've been in this industry longer, I don't believe that's the case anymore. I think there's a certain recognition that needs to occur that where we are as a society today and the tech that we have and the way that the society consolidates with one another and democracy and such, it's the best system that we have right now, but that's evolved over time. It's not all garbage. There's some good in there. And what blockchain comes and provides, in my opinion, is a level up. It's not necessarily a complete redo. It's not that everything is bad and magically everything is great with blockchain. It's a new tool. It's a new set of tools that we can use to better the lives of individuals, to create more transparency, more accountability in those that are in power, those that represent us. But I don't think that it's a complete do-over. I think we see that right now within our own industry. We have very similar issues
as we had
to the current traditional industry. So how do we learn from that? And which parts do we take in order to, if the idea is that achieving something and getting that first 80% is relatively easy, but then for every percentage after that, it's incrementally hard, maybe where we're at is, I'm just throwing a number, but let's say we're at 93%, and getting that 94th percent, that's what we're trying to achieve, and it's just a little extra bonus, but that means so much to certain people, and in certain parts of the world, it actually means a complete level up, because some people are completely out of this system.
And don't have any of it.
And now they're being brought into this system. For them, it really is a complete change. I would assume that for the majority of us here, it's an incremental value, but that is so significant as a society as a whole, and I think that's what gets me to wake up in the morning. It's that extra little.
I like that parallel bit, not total redo, which I think some of us got in for that, but like more level up, and therefore that level up can actually increase massively in other
significantly, for sure.
Right. What's your take, Michael? On
Yeah, I mean, like it kind of is like similar to like my previous answer in that, I think like there's good people and there's bad people in the world, right? And some people can do really bad things, but other people can do like good things, right? And I think like in terms of like getting more users and adding value to people, I think it really comes down to like developing a technology that ultimately solves like problems, right? And the problems that we're trying to solve here is basically like increased transparency and trust, right? Or what is often termed like the trust of the system, right? And what we really mean by that is, having code that kind of runs autonomously, that comes to consensus via a majority of the individuals, so not just like one individual or like, a few individuals, but like a majority of individuals in the network, and that, you have full transparency of their data. So for example, with like a simple application where you're swapping like one token to another, you can see like all the data going in, you can see it going out, and you can interact with that smart contract with the funds under your control, right? So you don't necessarily have to give like the funds to a third party, but even if you give funds to a third party on the chain as a whole, you always can see the data on the chain being like, okay, where's my money? Is it, in this wallet, is in that wallet, did it actually go through the smart contract I wanted to go through? And so even if you do like delegate work to a third party, and obviously like, people have the time to do everything that they want to do themselves, you delegate, right? But you can delegate on the blockchain to other people, but you still have the benefit of the transparency of on chain, right? And that to me is what I think is like the most powerful use case for blockchain technology. I think you can see it in like different use cases that are coming on board. And I think as the technology gets better, the amount of people being able to use blockchain technology is just going to increase over time.
Okay. And Lucian, you were talking a lot about the metaverse. And when you think, again, macro and the state of the world where we're in, like, what's your view of painting a world that is better thanks to the metaverse?
I think everything starts with a choice. You can choose how the world will look like, how is the future. And basically what we are doing is like living in the future and building what's not here right now. And that's why this is a choice. And of course, there will be challenges. There will be people that will say, well, this is, I don't know, escapism. This is not a virtual reality. This is not more reality or whatever. That's why basically Metaverse is an important part, but it's not what we are doing. That's why, for example, even in the name, the word, there is so much power in words. Words can build worlds. Multiverse, the way we choose this name is basically giving enough space to have this, let's say, physical reality and have these other worlds. And they are like, they can coexist without creating a conflict. So it's not necessarily only about the metaverse. But coming back to the choice of building something better and then like trying to imagine this future, trying to live in the future and then come back and say, okay, what do you need? And for us, for example, funny thing is we built a blockchain in the last 4 years that is there. I said, well, for that we need a blockchain. We have it. We need DeFi. Okay, we have DeFi. Then we need a portal between those worlds. We have, for example, a non-custodial wallet that now it's also evolving to a so-called X portal that is more than just a wallet, is your avatar, your identity. And you start building all those things and you try not to get distracted by anything else and just laser focus on the future you want to build. Because you know what happened yesterday and stuff like that, it's really, really sad, as I said. It's sad because it's like, I don't know, a few years, we'll need to work
we'll need to
for
figure out
few
what's
years
happening.
just because now we give so much fuel for all the others that were against what blockchain is and all those values and really, really amazing things that we can build. But yeah, this is life. We have to, you know, keep building.
And Dominic, so you talked a lot about decentralization, integrity, trust, transparency. I'm curious, again, thinking about the macro climate and the conditions we're in, like what gives you hope in what you're seeing, like applications or projects that you think are painting that better world?
Well, you know, I've complete faith in Web3, and like we're in some kind of analog to the crash of the dot-com bubble right now. Mm-hmm. And, you know, at the end of that, I think Amazon stock went down to $3. Amazon was growing like crazy and making profits and so on. And yeah, you know, its stock went to $3. And now it's $3,000. But I do think crypto needs a sort of cleansing, and I think, you know, we're going to see some consolidation and we're going to see a lot of changes. I think we're going to be in for kind of a bit of a gnarly ride, to be honest. A lot of things are yet to come out, and people are going to find that what they thought was one way was actually another way and things like that. But, you know, if you ask me to predict where we're going to be in 10 years, I'll tell you DeFi is going to be bigger than traditional finance. I tell you that, you know, in 5 years, only a minority of tech entrepreneurs are going to be creating companies. They're going to be creating DAOs. And they're going to raise money doing decentralization sales using tokens. That's a bet for you. And that's a profound change. I mean, that's really, really profound. And by the way, I mean, to give you an idea of the potential here, and this is what we're seeing, you know, the prevailing model has always been VC, right? Venture capital. It tends to be concentrated in Silicon Valley. You know, DFINITY raised money there. You guys did, obviously. And even now, a lot of blockchains, you know, raise a lot of money and you know, give money away to get people building on their chain. That's the prevailing model. I mean, Sam was a great proponent. Sam Bankman-Fried, great proponent of that, obviously. But you know, we believe in something different. We believe in DAOs and decentralization cells funding people, and that's just beginning to kick off right now on the internet computer. It's a very exciting time. And I tell you why. The reason is, you know, the traditional funding model is not democratic. Only a minority of the talent out there can access it. You know, I'm guilty as charged. I lived in Palo Alto for 10 years. But I saw what it was like before because, you know, I was in London. And there's just this immense talent around the world. I mean, there's a lot of talent in Europe, by the way. It's not easy to get venture capital in Europe. It's much easier in Silicon Valley. But there's this huge amount of talent around the world. You go to China, India, and these guys currently don't really have a seat at the tech economy, right? But decentralized funding and DAOs is going to democratize access. I mean, we know of huge teams now working on the internet computer in China, and they're just so immensely talented. It's incredible. And this influx of talent, which is enabled by the automation of things like fundraising, that democratizes access. And I'm not talking about ICOs. I'm talking about more sophisticated new models on the internet computer. There's something called the service nervous system, where governance tokens are sold and the proceeds are held in the service nervous system, DAO, under the control of the community and so on, to prevent fraud. But this is going to just drive absolutely immense growth. It's talent that creates growth. You've got to have the right platform. The blockchain's got to be able to support true Web3, where you can have true autonomy so you can't get hacked. You've got to get rid of the cloud. You can't really have a Web3 service that's, involves the cloud in any way, or it won't be secure. So you've got to have the right blockchain platform, of course. But in the end, it's developers that build the experiences that are going to bring people into Web3. And our view is that you democratize access by pursuing the original crypto vision, where people are able to raise money through the decentralized ecosystem, and you democratize access and you allow for absolutely massive amounts of talent to come in, and that's what we're already seeing. And I think that's why Web3 is going to be hugely successful. I think we'll go through a gnarly period. It won't last that long. I don't think it'll be like a year and a half, 2 years max. It may even be over sooner.
Okay.
Who knows? It's blockchain. Blockchain always bounces back, right?
Well, on that, we're very soon out of time. But so I think this has been enlightening. In particular, I hope you can take from here that we're not getting deterred, and the builders and the true believers of decentralization, integrity, trust, and transparency are here, and the world we envision and what we actually want to build is still true to its vision. And if anything, yes, times that are coming, it might be tough, and we don't know for how long, but there is a real calling here for continuing to believe on the true Web3 values. The last point that was made on talent, I think is hugely important to have that vision and to have true diversity of thought, diversity of actually geographic components, and really having something that's participative from everyone in the world is actually going to be truly important. So gentlemen, thank you so much for your insights and input, and let's keep building.